Hi, so I'm Wade. I'll be hosting the panel today, and to my left is Victoria Crone, MD of Xero, Shane Evans, the rose between two thorns, Shane, I believe you said it was, no, Head of Retail Marketing, Brand and Retail Marketing at ASB, and Janine Mountford, CFO at New Zealand Rugby. So I'm just going to throw it out there. So what is conscious leadership? What does it mean to you?
So it's quite a few things, but I thought the three that I really focus on is exactly what Bob was just talking about, which is a sense of purpose. So really understanding within your organisation what is its purpose, and that having metrics and goals that are financially orientated or performance orientated are often nowhere near as engaging and motivating for your people as a sense of purpose to what your organisation can really deliver, either to its customers, its community, or to its staff. And when you have that sense of purpose, and for me often the more inspiring and non-egotistical that sense of purpose is, the easier and more willing people, your staff will engage in that sense of purpose, along with your other stakeholders. And so when you have that, it's an incredibly empowering, amazing thing for people. So in an organisation I went into, there were some issues there. We didn't have a sense of purpose. We created that. We made one change in terms of leadership, and the shift in that organisation and my team from when I started to 4 months into it was phenomenal. And we didn't change anything except one person, and the team's 40 or 50, and what they came to work to do. And what does that mean? When also you can align that sense of purpose with your team's individual purposes, then that's like a double whammy. So when they are working on things that they are incredibly passionate about, and I had a woman once who was on the border of being performance managed out of the organisation. No one had had a conversation with her around what she was passionate about. When we discovered that and found out that that particular capability aligned to our sense of purpose, we put her on that. She turned around, and within 2 to 3 years she was known as an expert, and she now leads a company in New Zealand, and you just go, wow. And it was that simple, by just having a conversation with her around what floated her buttons. So one is a sense of purpose, and never underestimating how powerful that is in terms of people's engagement. The second is your approach to stakeholders, and I'm so going to find a new name for that, because that's such an old world and really doesn't give justice, because a stakeholder sounds like a functional, transactional thing that sits there, whereas actually your stakeholders are your people who either make your business and your purpose really successful or not. And when we talk about the world is changing, the whole win-lose model of where we've come from in the past, that I win at your expense, is going, and it's going fast, and I can't wait until that goes even faster. Because the sense of when you sit down and you work with your interested parties and you find out where is your joint sense of purpose, again, you can get amazing results from that you cannot get in the win-lose model. And the third one is really just how you interact with your people, and that they are people, they have emotions, they have goals, they have aspirations outside of life, they have challenges outside of work. So being able to be confident to have conversations at a different level rather than telling them what to do, which is, I'm building a real staff stream. But there are many managers out there who just like to tell their people what to do. And when you've got 100 or 200 people, you can't be that good at all of their jobs. So unless you empower them, you understand what makes them tick, then you collectively will get out of them incredible results, rather than thinking, you know best, and I'm going to tell you what to do. So that's the flavour, maybe too long, of what it means to me.
For me, leadership's, I kind of see it as a constant daily challenge. So when Wade said to me, come and talk about the state of conscious leadership, I was kind of like, well, for me it's kind of like, it's something that you need to focus on every single day, and every day throws up a completely new challenge. And I think, the whole alignment of purpose is kind of one of the light bulbs that went off in my head when I sat down with my team and thinking about how am I going to do things differently. Because what it does is gives you a bit of a frame to motivate them, but also it helps you prioritise the work that you give them as well. Because I think people get caught up in going, well, what am I supposed to do? Someone says this, someone says that. But if you align your purpose with what you're trying to achieve as an organisation, then you can kind of say, well, that doesn't fit, that's a fit, and kind of clear that off for them. But I think the other thing as well is echoing around identifying what makes people tick. And that thing inside them that gets them out of bed in the morning, and when that goes, then you lose all their motivation and their productivity and that. So if you can start motivating them and thinking around, oh, what's the most important thing to you and why you're here today and why you come to work every week, and then you can support them on that journey, then you've sort of got people engaged and watching that.
Firstly, for me, is I totally agree actually in terms of the what I call shining the light on the team. So really taking away that whole egotistical in terms of you are the boss and what says goes, turning those every conversation or as many conversations as you can with your team actually into coaching conversations. So giving them, empowering them, and actually giving them the opportunity to actually think about what they can do and when they deliver, and as much as they can deliver, actually praising them for it and really shining the light on them. I think the other one for me is, and after going through a bit of a self-reflection over a year, is actually really looking to, and myself actually just constantly self-evaluating what I do. And it was actually something that I came out of Fletcher Building, and something that Jonathan Ling, as the CEO, had his leadership team do. Every time they came out of a meeting, they'd actually self-evaluate and sort of how did they actually show up in that meeting. And it's something that I took away and I sort of constantly do myself, whether it's actually in a meeting or just an interaction I've actually had with one of my team, is just, how did I, after it happens, is how did I actually show up in that, and what could I have done better? And the other one that I'm very conscious on is, and you have both already touched on it, is really understanding your team and what makes them tick. Because if you don't understand what's could be going on in their lives, how can you really sort of help to bring out the best of them and actually get them to go where they really truly can aspire to?
Thank you. So you talk about the self-reflection there. How important is that for developing your own ability to be conscious, to be aware as a leader?
I think it's pretty important. I think it's something that you can easily just put to the side and not think about, because you're always concentrated on the next thing. We've got quite a rigorous sort of review process internally, and we have quite a transparent culture around sort of encouraging and mentoring people, and I find that really useful because you can sort of pull people aside a week or so later and say, that really important meeting, or like me catching up with you next week and saying, how do you think I went, and how do you think I approached that? And I think if you've got the confidence to open yourself up to let people sort of give you sort of feedback, then the next time you go in there, you're sort of a bit more aware of what you're doing or how you're responding to certain situations. So,
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's, I don't think not everyone is perfect. We've all got our little flaws in life, but understanding, being aware of them, and just constantly self-managing yourself in terms of those things, just make sure that you're actually delivering the best that you can to your team and your organisation.
It's quite cool when you catch yourself and you've learned something, and the next time that situation comes up and you react differently to it, and you sort of pat yourself on the back in the meeting and go, handled that a little bit better than I did last time.
So it is a continuous improvement process,
Yeah.
that being aware and then having the tool and then managing it. Yeah. So self-reflection for you?
I think it's really important, and I don't do enough of writing down. So when I write stuff down, then that's probably the best learnings that I can get, but I don't always have time to do that. So what I tend to do is just ask, when I'm getting feedback or when there's a situation or an issue that's come up, what in the situation is my accountability? And I find that then shifts the conversation from don't like it, really unhappy, to, oh, okay, so if I think first about what I could have done differently, then share that, then it opens the conversation up for other people to be saying, okay, I did some stuff not quite right there too, and then you can have some really good conversations. So I do as much reflection as I can, probably get better at it, and then it's always, what could I have done differently? And when you start to do that in a team, especially when you're customer facing, as sales and marketing is, then the team isn't reacting to the complaints that they get all the time. It's like, okay, what could we have done differently first? And then you have way better conversations with customers.
Okay. What are some of the barriers today for businesses to be a conscious business?
I do think there's a fear of what you don't know. So I think, in our schools today, our kids are being taught, stuff that is more in tune with conscious leadership. So they go into the workforce having expectations around that, and then at the other end you've got, you know, people who have done business for years and years and years, and you're suddenly asking them to think a different way, act a different way, and be quite different. And I think that, you know, you don't know what that's going to look like when you go through that and come out the other side. And so there's a big barrier there, and some, actually the language, conscious leadership for some, would just scare them off big time. So, and when you dig into it, it's not as scary and as potentially strange as you might think. So I think, you know, that's why the change is going to happen, because there's so many people coming through who are demanding to be treated differently. But there needs to be a bit of a shift, in my belief, at the top in the corporate world, you know, for some of that to come through. And it's interesting, in Australia, I read an article before Christmas around some of the chairs of boards over there resigning because they're recognising that there's different shifts coming through in business, and they're wanting to make space for people in that. And I was like, oh, good on you. Actually, that's really admirable.
Yes, it's good awareness.
It's really good awareness. So I think there's, you know, you've got that top end of we've done the business a certain way, it's always worked. Ooh, what's this thing?
Are there any people who that inspire you around the idea of that awareness and that conscious leadership, or even assets of people? It's always tough to put somebody up on a pedestal and be the guru type of thing, but are there people who've inspired you, components of that in your careers?
I've been fortunate to learn off my GM, Anna Curzon's awesome at this stuff, and she did a course with us, but she and just introduced a completely different way of thinking for me. And I think, you know, at the start it was quite challenging because we were sort of battling each other a little bit, but she kind of opened up a whole different world for me around people leadership, and I've learned so much from her around leadership that it's actually, when I sort of reflect on it now, from when I started working with her three years ago to where I've come to now, it's because she's challenged me in that space. I think as you go through your career, you need people like that sometimes, just to challenge you and say, actually, come on, you need to focus on this part, not this part over here. So,
I think with the first time I came across someone sort of break that managerial mould was my GM actually at Fletcher Building, who had done, through his career at BHP Steel, had done a lot of self-evaluation, self-intelligence sort of stuff, and it was the first time I sort of came across it. And so seeing someone who would quite be very, very comfortable, just come and sit actually in my room and just sort of say, well, you know, what am I, you know, give me some feedback. What do you think how am I handling the situation? Do you think I'm doing it right or wrong? And it would just be like, just blowing you away. So that was, Peter Wilson would be one of the first ones we ever came across, which was actually a real revelation.
There's a vulnerability there, isn't it? The need to be vulnerable, I guess.
But what it also builds is a huge amount of trust. For someone, for your GM to actually have those conversations and be willing to actually take feedback from you, just builds an amazing relationship between two of you.
I think in terms of the sense of purpose, Rod, I'm lucky to work for Rod Drury, and he's just, in terms of his ability to create a sense of purpose and then engage his organisation around that, I mean, he's just unbelievable, and has amazing amounts of energy that goes with that to motivate people. So in terms of sense of purpose, he's fantastic.
So what do you do personally to develop your awareness, the self-awareness part of yourself? Are there practices that you do, or tips or tools that you recommend?
Well, I think that asking for that feedback, not being, the greatest gift someone can give you is feedback. And not just from, your peers or your manager, but your team, other people actually around you. I think, Vic, you'll agree with this one, doing that for Global Women Leadership, doing the 360, which also involved, you had to nominate friends and your partner. Well, you couldn't get much more honest feedback than all of that coming through.
Okay, so asking for always asking for feedback, being open to the feedback.
Yeah,
great.
I mean, that and just trying to take some time out. It's quite hard when you're really busy to actually just take time out and think about your team and how you're leading your team, but when you do it, it's quite rewarding. And it does pay off, because then you sit down with your team in their one-to-ones or their reviews, and you've actually taken the time out to actually think about them, and I think it comes across that you're being quite authentic about your approach. But I think it's one thing I love to do more of. It's kind of just finding the time to do that at the right time. It's very difficult.
I think mine was more of a longer transition. And so in my 20s, I was kind of, because you're young and full of ideas and, and I'm quite a creative ideas person and I'm an extrovert. So the transition for me has really been learning to create space for other people to jump in and, have their ideas and that learning that actually, I can do stuff, but when I have, 50 or 100 of my people doing things at their full potential, then, man, I create amazing things. So that transition from when your team are always looking to you for the answers, and it's so easy to jump in and say, yeah, here's what I'd do. So not doing that, shutting up, listening really, really hard, and then asking lots of questions of them. That was a 2 to 3 year transition for me, for an extroverted creative person. That was quite hard. So, and now I just have to constantly remind myself of shut my mouth, turn my ears on, and ask questions. And what you get very used to that mode. And I think, coming from, I came from telecom, where that wasn't the mode. The more you talked and the more ideas you had, the better your performance was. So that I found that quite a challenging transition, but a very rewarding transition.
So yes, what have been some of the biggest leadership challenges for you guys?
I had a member of my team who got really sick last year, so in critical care, and I think that was probably the biggest challenge we ever had, is sort of working with her and her family and trying to manage through that process. I think that is when you realise that actually leadership can be quite difficult at times and personally hard. So I think that for me, and then sort of a few other things happen in my team's lives, and you kind of realise how big a impact your work can have on their lives as well, and vice versa. So it's kind of sort of managing that through. But I think that and anything kind of that impacts upon people in their lives, I think is probably the hardest part.
So one of the things that came out of the big leadership conference last year in San Diego, they talked about compassion being one of the growing trends in leadership today. So I'm kind of hearing... Yeah. We spend all day with these people, 50, 60 hours a week sometimes, and so they become your friends and family, so you've got to look after them as you can.
I think one of my biggest ones would have been when we restructured the dealer channel at Telecom. And it was a pretty dysfunctional relationship anyway, and and it was the model wasn't working, so we had to actually close down about 10-20% of our dealers. And some of these businesses had been partners of ours for 20 years, and that was their life. And so the approach we took to that was very much as compassionate as we could be. And the difference in the conversation when you take that approach to that, and then the relationships that you have on an ongoing basis, is completely different. So we fronted all the conversations, wherever we could. We understood what we could do to support, and then financially, and then in other ways in terms of encouraging into other businesses or facilitating other things. We did that where we could. And then for the rest of the channel that watched that, we had to then convince them that this whole new model we were bringing in was going to be really successful, and their businesses were going to be, more prosperous as a result. And you can't do that until you go through it. So again, taking that kind of sense of purpose and engaging them in that sense of purpose then makes it easier to go through the things that you need to do, and providing them with that support and understanding the impact that you're having on them across their life and their family. It's just a different lens, and it's never a fulfilling process going through something like that. However, if you are doing your best to support them, then people really, really appreciate that. They don't always enjoy the process, but it's nicer than just being told, see ya, and that's nice for 20 years, thanks. Yeah, so
it's nothing personal.
Yeah.
Really, it's got my name on it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you got, these guys, I said that, 20 years they've been doing business for us, and they're crying, and you're going, wow, I just feel so humbled right now. And so all you can do is just say thank you so much for what you've done. And if they're all good now. So and then when you follow up and you see where they've got to, and it's like, yeah, you've done well, and so they've got the confidence that they can rebuild their lives. So it's just that was quite challenging. I did struggle with that. So,
I think the one for me was, and it was actually on a very personal note, is had what I thought was always going to be my dream job. You know, I had aspired to actually go into Fletcher Building for many years and got in there and had an amazing 4 years, but it got to the stage towards the end where no matter how fast I was running, there's just something didn't feel right. And I suddenly realised it was actually the values weren't aligned, that constant pressure for profit in a time when with the GFC and everything was going against us. And having the fear, but also the turn off the little imposter voice in your head and actually applying for a role at New Zealand Rugby and going, I know nothing about rugby, I know nothing about sport, never played sport. But here I am going to take up my life actually out of Auckland and down to Wellington, but it's an organisation that's just got an amazing vision and inspiring, unifying New Zealanders. I mean, that's how much better can life be actually working for an organisation like that. So that would be one of my biggest leadership challenges, is actually walking into an organisation I had no idea about and actually saying, all I can do is, in the word of Therese Walsh, is just as long as I can add 5%, I can actually improve the organisation with my what I can add by 5%, then I've done the job.
Great. I heard it might be just a vicious rumour about they're teaching how to high five down there now. We're going to open up the floor to you folks. As I said, it's a kind of interactive session. So are there any kind of questions that you'd like to ask the panel?
First of all, I'd just like to say it's really inspiring to listen to you guys, because I think this whole movement of conscious leadership and defining purpose, it's been around for a while, but it's not until we actually see businesses really doing it that you actually see the power. So thank you very much. It's been great listening to you. I think my question really revolves around defining purpose, because it's just something that I feel like a lot of organisations battle with, even just defining their strategic purpose, let alone getting people to identify what their unique purpose is. And as somebody who's been on a journey myself of trying to define my purpose and actually seeing the amazing benefits that brings, what do you do in your organisation, or to what extent have you worked with your organisations to help define that purpose, both for the organisation and for individuals?
So for me, it's purpose comes from the heart, not from the head. And so the first thing you have to do is work with your team to open them up to think from the heart, and make that okay. That it's okay that you can be, emotional and female womanish, and and have feelings and all that.
Well.
Yeah. I know you do. 90% of the time. I know you do, and I know that because when you create room and you make that okay for your team, guys and girls, to have emotions, then actually it all comes out, and then you have to have the trust. So if you create a safe environment, it's about from the heart. So why are we here, and asking why loads and loads and loads of times, because the first 4 or 5 times is still in that very rational, superficial kind of space, and then the deeper and deeper you go. And then I always break it into teams, so we get 2 to 3 working on it, and then we bring it back together. So it's a lot of brainstorming, a lot of creating a safe environment, and then a lot of thinking about, I call it, benefits, not features. So emotions, not functions, if you like. Because when you hit that emotional space, that's when it's really, really powerful, in my experience.
Quite often you get a purpose or a vision or a statement from an organisation that you're working with and going, I don't really like it, or I don't really agree with it. But the trick is to find in it how it's relevant to you and your team. And you can workshop that and run sessions, because once you take that vision and put it into your own words and say, well, this is how it applies to ASB brand, then it becomes really powerful, because you'll create it and it links back to what you're trying to do. So I think it's really important to actually take it and then use it in your work life as well. But you don't have to take the words exactly and then go, right, we must adhere to this. It's kind of like, how do you translate that so it's useful for you?
And it's something I've actually been working through with my team. It's easy to sort of say, if you're working in the All Black team, or you're working with the Sevens, or any of our national teams, or the commercial team, there's something that they really have got an output there that they can grab onto. And my poor team sits there and says, but we're finance, and we're IT, and we're HR, and we're the back office. And I said, but we're the glue that holds everything together. We're the one team that every part of the organisation touches. So if we are really about actually making sure that we are allowing everyone else to succeed, because we're providing a service to all of them, then we're developing that purpose actually around that words, we're the glue that holds the whole organisation together.
I guess my question is, what kind of leadership is required for, I guess, graduates at either an intern level or the first year? And what's the strategy of retention? And I guess what's your experience with people at that level?
I look at when I graduated and compare myself to some of the graduates coming through now, and they're definitely a lot smarter and a lot more aware, I think. But I also think you've got to manage their expectations a little bit. You've got to let them know that they do need to start at the bottom and work their way up and all those things, which is quite hard sometimes, but we do get a lot of CEOs in waiting sort of just kind of drift into the building sometimes. You kind of think you got to... I kind of try and use to find the right words for it, but you just kind of need to coach them a little bit for them to understand the right way of going about business as well. Because there's so much that you just learn in business that you kind of don't realise. So, yeah.
Hiring around attitude for students is really, really important. And they can have all the qualifications in the world. If they don't have the attitude or the culture fit in terms of the values fit, then they won't get through. So then they've got to make sure that the values that they have as individuals has some alignment to the organisation they're going into, because it's harder to get into organisations because of the focus on values. Or if they do get through, then being in an organisation where your values don't fit is quite a hard space to be. So having the resilience to do that. I think the thing I love about they're not kids, young people coming through today, but I'm getting so old, is I just love the energy and enthusiasm, and I think that's where your emotional intelligence skills comes in as a leader. So, and I try to have very diverse teams, and my sales director, who I've just appointed, is 26, and he's a future star. But he doesn't have the experience that the other members of my team do, and they're going to their 50s. So I do a lot of work with my team around setting expectations. So, when he reacts like this or you react to him like this, think about how that's working, think about where he's coming from and his worldview. And so a lot of patience and tolerance from management will get a lot out of the younger generation coming through. And then as a leader, doing a lot of work to create the environment where all views and all ideas are welcome, and that you take those biases off in terms of your hat on it, that's just another upstart coming through and blah, blah, blah. Actually, no, they've got some incredibly good ideas, and we're going to listen to that, and we're going to shove it all together, and we're going to come up with something far more richer. So creating that environment as a leader is really important.
I think that the one that you actually mentioned, Shane, I think is the key one for me, is just making sure that they, the awareness of how to get by in the world, and actually that really, you just got to do the hard yards to begin with. It's really, really difficult, but that sort of just having those conversations with them as opposed to just leaving them in the dark is the real key one.
Just wondering how you encourage. So you've obviously been through the journey of conscious leadership. How do you encourage that with your staff or members of your teams?
I think when you model the behaviour, you don't need to encourage much as the feedback I would have from my teams. So if you're modelling the behaviour, because your teams are feeling inspired, encouraged, supported, they know they can come and talk to you, you have a very trusted relationship. So it doesn't take a lot to go from that to, actually I might do some stuff in that space. I think the bigger challenge I experience anyway is the teams that I then work alongside or working with other organisations who may not share that approach. So the question is, how do you inspire them? I'll just hand over to you.
Delegation.
For me, and I've got probably a live example right at the moment. We just one of my team, and just sort of saying to him, he's to actually really think about his brand within the organisation. So he's a new manager. I've given him a wider portfolio to look after last year after a restructure that we had, and he's just got this amazing knack with people, but so just trying to mould him actually to become a really good people leader. And so giving him the encouragement, because the feedback he's given me is like, no one's ever had any faith in me before, and it's like, but I can see it in you, we're just going to get you there, but just saying to him, you just really need to think about your brand. How do you want people to perceive you in the organisation, and really get him to actually turn on his self-awareness, and then once he gets that, then his team's going to flourish.
I think what it's given me is sort of like a kit bag of tools that I can use when I need them. And because sometimes you come across a situation, you kind of go, I don't know which way to go with this, but actually you've got something you can go back and refer to, and then you can go back and say, well, perhaps you should try this, and go away and work on that. And that for me is probably the thing that I've taken most of.
I just wanted to ask the panel about their feeling about human resources. Overseas in major corporations, we see human resource people or human resource managers being assigned to operational managers to work with them. Two organisations that I can think of, quite disastrous consequences with high churn from this area because dissatisfaction with having somebody second guess the operational manager. And I just wondered what your experience is in that area.
Well, it's something that we're looking at the moment. We've gone, the New Zealand Rugby previously has been quite that very traditional model, you know, HR will do your performance management, will put in place your performance improvement plans, have the discussions with you, send out your letters in terms of your 10-year service. Where we're saying now managers should be doing that, and let HR help to build really good managers. So that business partnering sense from that perspective is, as opposed to second guessing from the operational sense, is the people and capability team actually really getting out there and actually training and evolving the managers to become the best people leaders that they can actually be.
So I think HR's role, you know, they play such a difficult role because they're trying to, you know, support the organisation and achieve the organisation's goals, and then support their people, and it's really hard to play those two hats. In terms of training and development, I think HR have, you know, big responsibility to deliver to the organisation programs that, you know, support this space, whether that is, you know, their own programs or outsourcing programs. And of course, we haven't been through it. I'd heavily suggest outsourcing his programs.
What was that program called?
Jolt. But I think my experience would be, in terms of then, once you've been through a program, the coaching that you get around that is really important. And you can't have HR do that for you, because HR have no understanding of your challenges in leading an operation, especially if it's a big operation. So I have called on the use of external coaches, and also people across the organisation who have good coaching skills, and then budding them up. And bearing in mind that coaching is asking questions, not telling you your opinions. And that's what I find the biggest challenge is, when people go to coach you, they tell you what to do. So people who really understand coaching. So I would far rather either source great coaches externally or utilise the coaching skills I have in the organisation and buddy people up who have more similar experiences. I just think that's a tough job for HR to do.
Yeah, I suppose sometimes it depends on the size of the team.
I think it does.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're in a
Smaller.
more sophisticated
Yeah.
organisation as well on that
Yeah.
journey, but for some organisations that would be really, really hard.
Shane, you briefly touched on this, but I just want you to go into a little bit more detail around worker productivity.
Yep.
So how does conscious leadership impact on worker productivity and essentially a business's bottom line?
I mean, it's really simple. If your workforce is engaged, they're going to be more productive. You know, if you have an employee who's disengaged, then they'll, you know, turn up on time for work, and they'll leave on time, and they'll muck around, and they'll look at the internet. But if they're really excited about the work that they're doing, then they'll pull their heart and soul into it and over-deliver on that. So for me, it's really, I get excited when I see my team who are just really excited about what they're doing at work, and will go the extra mile and are talking about it and chirping about it and challenging me and saying, why aren't we doing that? You should be focused on this. And that to me is kind of most important thing, because, you know, productivity is a big theme at ASB, and I've sort of spoken about a lot, but that's why I believe we're in business, is to be productive. And I think the more that I can help my team do that, then the better. But the great thing is that once they you help they become productive, then they actually focus on achieving their own goals, and then you see them go on to do bigger and better things, and that's kind of the lovely resolve at the end of it all. So, yeah.
And I think that the big one for me, so you've got the engagement side of it and then the personal, and I call it quality, not quantity, so you don't want them working 80 hours because actually that's bad also. But is the purpose provides a prioritisation mechanism for them. So if you've got a clear sense of purpose, then it's so much easier for them to say, oh, does this kind of fit that or not? And things that don't, then it's easier to have a conversation and actually know, why would I do that? So you're getting activity in your organisation that is supporting where your company wants to go.
Just this question leads on from what Jason was saying, really, which is linking performance to productivity. Just wondering if there are any studies or proof points that are being kind of delivered at board level to kind of really change that thinking quicker.
Yeah. Well, I think there's definitely proof points around purpose. There's absolutely proof points around emotional intelligence. There's case studies all over that, across NASA, commercial businesses, and that's around linked to the bottom line in terms of profitability.
Yeah.
So in those two spaces, I definitely know of, you could Google it and you'll find easily case studies on those two.
Yeah, I don't think it's a new thing at all. I think it's always been around. I think there's plenty of data out there to support it. Yeah.
The question around, let's talk about vulnerability and linking that to, you talk about, I think that self-revelation can breed an intimacy, can breed a stronger connection. So how important is that around leadership and creating that trust for you folks? Have you seen that in action?
Oh, I think it's hugely valuable. I mean, when I sort of sit down with my team actually on a weekly basis, and I have individual one-on-ones with my direct reports, and I say to them, this isn't a WIP, we call them WIPs, work in progress meeting, or just talk about whatever you want to talk about. What's happening at home, just anything you might be struggling with, anything you want to share with me. It's actually about that, and it just creates that whole different dialogue as opposed to, I don't want to work through your bloody to-do list. I'm assuming you've got that actually under control, and if you don't, then just tell me. It's a no surprise policy. But just having that more engaged conversation with your team, you just get you've touched on it, Shane, you just get that high level of engagement and productivity out of people. They just want to come to work because people care about them.
Yeah. Quite often you'll sit in a meeting with quite senior people and everyone kind of like look to them for all the answers. But it's great when they go, actually, we don't know, that's why you're all here. Let's try and work our way through it. And I think the more that you see that in organisations, people feel a bit more honest to go, actually, I don't really know the answer to that. Can we just sort of sit down and work it out? Because sometimes you just don't know. And I think if you can do that with your people, but also show them times when you might go, actually, in a one-on-one conversation, go, yeah, sorry, I didn't handle that as well as I could have. And then they go, okay, that's nice, it's good to see that you're human.
I think it's that sits in the adult paradigm when you can be vulnerable with each other. I think when you can't, then you sit in the parent-child, adult-child paradigm, and I think that's then you just go. You're not creating an environment, because if someone looks at you and you're always positioning yourself as right and perfect and then they're kind of like, oh, well, I don't want to stuff anything up. You become a little bit scared about that. So it's very much that's a good paradigm for me around. When I go into a meeting, do I think about someone like I think about my dad? Or, from that parent-child perspective, or do I think about someone in terms of sitting here having a conversation with you and I'm going to act quite differently?
I just wondered if any, and how you deal with any fallout from clients around, a new way of leading that perhaps isn't aligned with their organisation?
Yeah, great question.
I haven't come across any fallout.
Can't think of anything.
No.
We have an example of the opposite effect. One of our clients did Jolt purely because they're about to lose a multi-million-dollar contract because they're very insular, and so the client was going to get rid of them because of that, and they used Jolt to open them up. And as a result of that, we're now picking up them because they're like, "What have you guys done to transform?" So you'll get cut if you're not more self-aware, more self-intelligent in how you operate. So yeah, it's important. Great, well that brings us to the end of Conscious Leadership. Before we go, just one more round of applause for our very generous panel.